Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers. You are here in Season 5 of Wrestling at Random, where each and every week we review, as the title of the show indicates, a randomly chosen professional wrestling show. And here in Season 5, the theme is more wrestling than ever. Nearly 20,000 shows, probably 50, 60,000 hours of professional wrestling are at the randomizer's disposal. And this week, we're going back to the well. The randomizer takes us back to what was always my favorite WWF TV show as a kid. Wasn't a huge WWF kid, but Saturday Night's Main Event. Was always so excited when that would come around. And here we have one of the earlier episodes of Saturday Night's Main Event from 1986.
This is the 5th edition of Saturday Night's Main Event, and it's from March 1st, 1986. Now, here on the show, if you're a new listener, what we like to do is go through and give you a little history, give you a little context. Like Adam mentioned, we've done Saturday Night's Main Event. This is probably our 4th Saturday Night's Main Event we have episode between here and the bonus feed that we have over on our Patreon, patreon.com/wrestling at random, where we have bonus episodes not available on the free feed. I think we've covered a lot of Saturday Night's Main Events. So if you'd like to hear about the history of Saturday Night's Main Event, go back to Season 1 of this podcast, where we talk about an awesome episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, and we give a full history, really interesting tidbits about how it came about with NBC, Saturday Night Live, and just the overall huge success that Saturday Night's Main Event was for the WWF in their big 80s growth period. So make sure that you go back and listen to that first Saturday Night's Main Event we recapped. Here, this is March 1st, 1986. This is the 5th edition of Saturday Night's Main Event. We are on the road to Wrestlemania 2. And this was taped February 16th from Phoenix, Arizona, in the Veterans Memorial Coliseum in Phoenix.
A very cool looking building. Fashion corner on the building. Like, it looks unique. It has the vibe of almost like a smaller Boston Garden. By the way, if you're looking back through the archives, it is Season 1, Episode 15 is the first time we reviewed Saturday Night's Main Event. The May 27th, 1989 show, which featured Hulk Hogan versus the Big Boss Man in a steel cage.
Yes, what a great show that we watched and a great podcast we did.
Maybe Hogan's best U.S. match ever, I would say.
Yeah, it was great. This show, we are, like I mentioned, on the road to WrestleMania 2. And one of the things we talked about, we've covered a lot of the WrestleMania 1 build-up. We've reviewed War to Settle the Score or Brawl for It All. I can't remember which ones we've covered, but we've covered a lot of the build to WrestleMania 1. And one of the big things we talked about during that build was how huge of a star, a TV star and celebrity Mr. T was, and how big that was for them to have Mr. T as part of WrestleMania. It was a big success. We're going into WrestleMania 2. Let's run it back, because we're opening up Saturday Night's Main Event here with Mr. T in a boxing gym hitting the heavy bag, and he gets cut off by Mean Gene Okerlund coming to ask him about a boxing match he's going to have later tonight against the ace, Cowboy Bob Orton.
Yeah, we go from there to the classic Saturday Night's Main Event Open.
Only because we were watching this on Peacock, the WWE network. That's an overdub, because still at this point in time, Obsession from Animotion is the theme song for the original broadcast.
Yes. And then we go to the building. We got a really cool full house lights up view of this packed Veterans Memorial Coliseum. Jesse Ventura and Vince McMahon are there live. It's that kind of weird angle they would do for these early Saturday Night's Main Events in terms of where the announcers were. They're like 10, 15 rows back, almost like in a modern arena where the seating transitions from the floor to behind the hockey boards. It's a different look, but it's a cool vibe.
I did want to note that I thought that opening T promo was pretty good.
Yes, it was great. And it's also like, you forget how Mr. T, he, like, everyone loved him, but like, he was a jerk. He was a big tough guy jerk. Like, he's so mean to Mean Gene Okerlund here, telling him to get out.
He is, but he's also a professional actor, so his
Yes.
delivery on this is
Tremendous.
and his main character on the A-Team was being a badass.
Yeah.
And here he is doing it again, and he's very good in this role.
You talked about actor and delivering lines. It's one thing I want to quickly mention. We talked about in the one of the other early, I think we actually reviewed one of the first, if not the first episodes of Saturday Night's Main Event a while back as well, that particularly in these early episodes, but even further throughout, it feels like not as much Vince McMahon, but Jesse Ventura's lines throughout this are very scripted. He sounds like a guy literally delivering written out scripted lines. It's very strange, particularly if you're used to the more organic back and forth of Vince and Jesse, or even Gorilla and Jesse. It's definitely a different vibe.
Not only are we going to get 2 title matches tonight, but we're going to get a Hulk Hogan music video.
Yes.
We see clips from last month's Piper's Pit segment, where Hogan told Piper and Bob Orton that he's got a friend who's willing to box Bob Orton, and he signs a contract for Mr. T to come in and do it. Piper throws a tremendous tantrum here for being outsmarted because Mr. T is returning.
Yeah, Piper is great here. It's not quite Flair and Jesse Barr, but you feel bad for Bob Orton being next to Roddy Piper because like Bob Orton's really good, but you don't even notice him next to Piper. It's also funny here seeing Piper and Orton together as dastardly heels, because you go back a show we did recently, a worldwide episode from 1983 that had babyface Roddy Piper, Bob Orton, and Ric Flair as like the conquering good guys.
Yeah, Piper and Orton are cutting a promo with Mean Gene, and Piper says, "This ain't Rocky. This is real man here." And they don't let Orton speak at all, which is totally fine.
That's exactly as it should be.
So Mr. T's in the back. He's getting taped up. We see clips of T sparring and knocking a guy down. Mr. T's ranting and raving that he's going to take the chump out in a round or 2, calls Piper a chump, and we're ready for Mr. T versus Cowboy Bob Orton.
He also tells Mean Gene to get out again. I was amused. I like that running gag.
Roddy Piper's accompanying Bob Orton to the ring. This is a 10-round boxing match, 3-minute rounds. I'm nervous because worked boxing is usually terrible. We've seen a lot of fake boxing on this podcast. I'm looking at you, Scotty Flamingo. But here we are.
Will this pass the Scotty Flamingo versus Johnny B. Bad WCW Clash of the Champions test? I believe that's also in season 1, one of the earliest episodes of this podcast where we reviewed that boxing match and show.
They stand nose to nose for instructions, and Piper wipes the forehead of Orton with a towel, and then he wipes Mr. T's face just to mess with him. We get Orton attacking Mr. T behind the referee's back before the bell. They actually start boxing. T lands some good shots.
And then Orton, it's so funny. We always talk about Terry Funk and how influential Terry Funk was and how like Dick Slater just tried to be Terry Funk in terms of in-ring mannerisms. Bob Orton's another one that's like a kind of a dime sword Terry Funk. His jabs here look exactly like Terry's.
The crowd is cheering for Mr. T. They're chanting for him, and they throw some punches and tie up. After a break, Orton pokes T with the thumb of his glove right in the eye. Doctors have to come in to check on Mr. T's eye. We restart. They trade some shots, and the bell rings to end the round.
I love the way this round ends with the ref. They're in a clinch. The ref's trying to break it up. And then Bob Orton hits like the most pro wrestling working punch you've ever seen, but with the boxing glove on. That just cracked me up.
Yeah, T hits the canvas, takes a bump off of this punch here, and we go to round number 2. Orton's showboating around. T catches him with some big shots. Piper immediately jumps up on the apron to distract the referee, allowing Orton to bury some knees to the midsection of Mr. T.
As one does in a boxing match.
He holds T so that Piper can take a shot, but Mr. T moves and Piper hits Orton. T then nails Piper. He nails Orton with a punch, sending him over the top rope to the floor, and Bob Orton is counted out in this boxing match. He's counted out of the ring, and Mr. T is your winner.
A count out in this boxing match. I will say that I'm glad they did not try to really do a whole lot of boxing in this. This was a smoke and mirrors professional wrestling match with guys wearing boxing gloves and lightly adhering to the boxing rules for what it was. And by the standards of pro wrestling boxing matches, this was really fun, particularly given Piper kind of making everybody better here.
Piper in the ring spits on Mr. T, and he wants to fight Mr. T right now. And from behind, Orton buries a knee to the back of Mr. T. They double team him. Piper takes off his belt. He's whipping Mr. T with his belt while Orton is holding his arms down. T eventually gets up. He's angry. And he wants Piper. They will eventually fight at WrestleMania 2 in a boxing match that was notoriously terrible as well.
Yeah, this I feel like was better than that one would be. It's also like, man, you realize 1986, different standards in terms of what you could say. When that whipping is happening, Jesse has a line that I'm like,
horrible. Yeah, it doesn't.
I don't even understand how you got away with it in 1986, much less viewing it through.
Well, Vince didn't feel cool with it in 1986.
Yeah, when Vince doesn't acknowledge
Vince
something
is your
like
moral
that,
compass.
in 1986, may not have been the best choice of words. Jesus.
Bobby Heenan and King Kong Bundy are with Mean Gene. Bundy says he wants Hogan in the WWF Championship. Heenan has a contract in his pocket. He says he wants a shot at Hogan's title. We go to the ring for Steve Gatorwolf versus King Kong Bundy. Bundy wins immediately with an avalanche in the corner, and he insists on the 5 count, which is always cool when that happens.
The Bundy 5 count is tremendous. It needs to come back. This is a total nothing match. The highlight of this entire segment was in the interview beforehand, Bobby Heenan calling Mean Gene a dimwit. Gene is just taking all the abuse here on NBC.
Bundy grabs the mic, demanding Hulk Hogan.
The mic where we've talked about before, sometimes on shows where like the mic is just going through to the crowd, but it's not actually like a line into the broadcast. And that's kind of the deal here. You get the sense of what he's asking for, but you don't really hear it.
Mean Gene is interviewing the #1 contender for Hulk Hogan's title. It's the magnificent Muraco. And he's telling us that Mr. Fuji has the flu. And he believes that Hulk Hogan is behind it somehow.
What a great heel line. I just love stuff like that. I'm also thrilled to see Don Muraco here. He's a guy who I'm actually surprised that we have not gotten more of him on the podcast. We had the famous Muraco Superfly cage match a couple times. We had a few Muraco skits on TNT, but outside of that, we haven't had a whole lot of in-ring.
Fuji will not be in his corner tonight. However, Mr. Fuji has a fill-in manager. It's Bobby the Brain Heenan. Heenan has come out. He says anytime someone's in the ring with Hogan, he's there to support that person.
I love that. Bobby Heenan's hatred of Hulk Hogan knows no bounds and drives all of his decision-making. We then get a great, ridiculous camera shot of Mr. Fuji laying down backstage with an ice pack on his head. God, that's great.
And I love the character consistency that Bobby Heenan has hated Hulk Hogan for 30 years, and at no point did he ever like him, whether Hogan was a heel or a babyface. Yes. Never at any point did Bobby Heenan like Hulk Hogan.
It's the most right someone in wrestling kayfabe has ever been, the most vindicated they've ever been, when after Hogan turned on WCW and joined the NWO, Bobby was like, I told you people, this is who he is.
Hulk Hogan is with Mean Gene. He's concerned about the Fuji Heenan switch and what's going on here. And we go to the ring for the WWF Championship. Now, this was a hallmark of Saturday night's main event. They would put the main event on right at the top of the hour so that they would get the most viewers, and then the worst matches were towards the end as the night got after midnight on the East Coast. So
yeah, because let's remind people that if you were on the East Coast, this show, again, in the Saturday Night Live time slot would start at 11:30 Eastern. I mean, even here Central Time, 10:30, it was crazy. So yeah, you want to get your big stuff on as early as possible.
So here's the WWF Championship, the challenger, the magnificent Muraco, the champion, Hulk Hogan. We hear Real American for the first time as Hulk Hogan's theme song. We'll see it later in the video, but this was the first time they replaced Eye of the Tiger on television with the theme song Real American.
Yes, Real American, which, as we've talked about before, I think we had a match where they were featured. Real American was the theme song briefly for the tag team of Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda, the tag team champions in the WWF.
That is correct. And Eye of the Tiger was always Hogan's theme song until now. And so here, Muraco's off to the quick start. Strikes and back rakes, and then Hogan makes a comeback with back rakes of his own.
That babyface, that fiery babyface Hulk Hogan, it always gets me how just 90% of his offense were eye rakes, back rakes, stuff like that.
Heenan's on the apron, and he gets punched by Hogan.
Takes
Hogan's
an incredible bump. You realize this is where Bobby still, the neck wasn't terrible at this point. An unreal bump off the apron. It's also so wild to think back and remember that just 2 years prior, Bobby Heenan was still a very active wrestler. Bobby Heenan did all Japan tours in 1984. Bobby Heenan had his neck injured in a match opposite Atsushi Onita prior to Onita's knee injury in All Japan just 2 years before this.
Hogan hits an atomic drop, which sends Muraco over the top to the floor. On the outside, Hogan continues the offense and throws Muraco back in. They're trading punches. Hogan's getting the better of it. He puts on a bear hug. Muraco headbutts his way free. And then Muraco's got his thumb taped up, and he throws the thumb to the throat of Hogan. Similar to the spike that Solo Sikoa uses today, or Umaga used back in the early 2000s for WWE.
Yeah. Vince calls it the Asian spike. One other thing, just from a production standpoint, that really stood out to me, it's something I had not thought about before. And then the second this thought popped in my mind, I'm like, yeah, this is what it always is. WWF, this era through the late 80s into the early 90s, shot managers at ringside better than any company in professional wrestling ever has, whether it be the close-up shots of them and their reactions, or as we see here, the camera shot from over Bobby Heenan's shoulder looking directly into the ring. I love that. Like, it was a manager's promotion in this era, and they did such a good job of making them feel like a big deal.
Muraco hits the thumb spike, jumping off the second rope onto Hogan. Hogan kicks out and starts hulking up.
Jesse Ventura is unhappy after Muraco hits this second rope fist drop style Asian spike. Jesse is screaming, "Go for the pile driver!" But instead, Don Muraco there's no sense of urgency. He gets a few stomps in, goes for the pin, does not get the job done, and then Hogan is hulking up.
He hits the boot, drops the leg, and then Heenan hits the ring to break up the pin for the disqualification. At this point, major angle alert. Bundy hits the ring to save Heenan. Muraco's holding Hogan as Bundy hits repeated avalanches in the corner. He's squashing Hogan. Big splashes from Bundy. Bulldogs finally hit the ring. The British Bulldogs come out to save Hogan, but Hogan gets stretchered out. They've got a neck brace on.
They've got a stethoscope, a doctor with a doctor's bag.
And Hogan gets taken out in an ambulance. This was the big angle to lead to Hogan versus Bundy in a cage at WrestleMania 2 as the main event for WrestleMania 2.
Everything about this post-match attack was great.
Tremendous.
Bobby Heenan running and falling and running, trying to get away, is tremendous stuff. They did a great job both here and then immediately after we get the video recap, and then we go to the scene of chaos backstage. Gorilla Monsoon is yelling at people to get the hell out of here. Gene is trying to get a word with anyone he can in the chaos. We hear Gene off mic asking, "What hospital?" This is really well done and really like a believable scene of chaos with an injury like this. Something that you don't necessarily always associate. Even a few years later, WWF production and the really slick nature of it, this almost feels to me more like a different territory. We talked like a Mid-South injury angle. It's maybe not that heavy-handed, but it's closer to that than you would expect given where we're at.
No, and when they turn on the Sirius, it means something.
Yes,
here.
it's a good
And
point.
It was a big deal that Hogan was taken out in this ambulance. We go back to the ring. WWF Tag Team Championship. The challengers. The Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith. They're the British Bulldogs with Captain Lou Albano as their manager.
Such a weird combination. Babyface Bulldogs with babyface Lou Albano. That always takes me aback.
They're taking on the Tag Team Champions, the team of Brutus Beefcake and Greg the Hammer Valentine.
The Dream Team. How
Dream
could this
Team.
not be a Dream Team? It's Brutus Beefcake, the former Dizzy Ed Boulder, teaming with podcast favorites, Jeremy Deemer favorites, Greg the Hammer Valentine. We've not had a whole lot of the Hammer lately.
Their manager is another podcast favorite, Luscious Johnny V, who we can't stand.
Well, he's a favorite for me here as a manager because that means he's not on commentary.
He's not on commentary.
Thank God. The upgrade from having Luscious Johnny V on commentary and then Vince realizing I have a exponentially better Johnny V that I could put on commentary, that being Jesse Ventura. What an upgrade.
We see a clip from January where the Bulldogs won a non-title match to get this title match here on Saturday night's main event. All British Bulldogs early. What an explosive team when this team is on offense. You were not seeing anything like this in 1986 WWF. Watching Dynamite hit the ropes so hard, come off so fast, this was just this was something out of a completely different territory.
Well, and also it's just how fleeting this was, because you really only had these few years in the WWF before Dynamite would start to break down. Like you compare
next year.
this. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You compare and contrast this to that match from just a few years later that we reviewed in the bonus feed not all that long ago with Dean and Joe Malenko against the British Bulldogs, where Dynamite he's smaller, he's still muscular, but he's smaller, and he can only go for short spurts of maybe a minute 90 seconds, and then he has to tag in Davey, and Davey is the work rate guy. He's the workhorse, he's the star of the team here. While Davey is good, this is all about Dynamite Kid. They are both also terrifyingly jacked for their size. Like, cartoonish does not even begin to describe how huge Dynamite Kid is for how short he is. And then obviously we've talked about before, Davey's just like a short little semi truck. Like, he's just massive.
Davey Boy puts the Jim Briggs special onto Beefcake. I went nuts.
Yes!
He went back to his young David roots with the Jim Briggs special.
My notes said as well, a little bit of young David here.
If you don't know what we're talking about, go back and listen to our World of Sport recaps over in the bonus feed there, where we saw young David, a 16-year-old Davey Boy Smith in wrestling in England. Yeah, tremendous stuff. Here, Davey press slams the Hammer for a 2 count, and the Bulldogs are dominating, which is awesome.
Yes.
I loved everything about the Bulldogs on offense here.
Well, if you are agenting this match and you have a choice, who do I want to be on offense more? The British Bulldogs or Greg Valentine and Brutus Barber Beefcake? I would go with the Bulldogs. They did as well. This is a very entertaining start to this match.
After commercial, Hammer and Beefcake cut Davey off. Hammer puts a figure 4 on, but Dynamite breaks it up. Dynamite Kid tags in. They trade some shots. Hammer's getting the better of it.
You're leaving out the most important part of this match. Davey Boy hits a great second rope dropkick, and then he hits the rarest of the rare, the standing non-obese babyface splash. He lands it.
That, yes.
I was in shock.
We get the heat on Dynamite, and for the first time in this match, Beefcake and Valentine are really on offense here.
It is not good. The only thing worse than Beefcake and Valentine on offense is Vince McMahon calling Greg the Hammer Valentine's elbow smash a brain buster. Kind of strange. Then it's a really awkward second rope elbow drop for a 2 count, a shoulder breaker out of the corner for 2. And man, the gulf between offense, excitement and offense. From the Bulldogs to Greg Valentine here in 1986 WWF is it's something.
Now, Vince also calls the cover by Beefcake, he says it's a cover by Beefer for 2.
And God.
Never have I hated a name more than Beefer for Brutus Beefcake.
He says it multiple times. Beefer makes the save. No, stop saying that. It's also, I feel like, the only name that Brutus Beefcake did not wrestle under. Like, I am shocked that when Brutus Beefcake turned back babyface in WCW after being the Butcher, that they did not call him the Beefer, that they called him the Booty Man instead.
Valentine goes to the top rope. He gets thrown off the top. Dynamite goes to the top rope, hits a shotgun drop kick for a 2 count.
Oh, insane.
Valentine then got his foot on the rope to break up that pin. Dynamite shoots Hammer off the ropes. He comes off and hits like an elbow or a forearm to the head of Dynamite. They kind of collide there, and Dynamite goes down. Hammer collapses on top of him, and his leg is just across the chest of Dynamite, and he gets the pin. This is the finish. It was nonstop Bulldog ass kicking, and then we get this fluky pin here. Still your champions, Beefcake and Valentine, lucking into a title defense.
I thought this finish was great. Like, if what you are going to do is not have the Bulldogs win, if you're going to beat the Bulldogs, this is the way to do it. Not only is it the fluke as far as they bonk heads, Valentine falls on top of them, just the limb is there and it gets the pin. Like, immediately, Dynamite is up. Like, he's a little woozy, but he's up. Hammer is out cold, and they really take the time to make sure that gets through to you, that Dynamite, even though he got pinned, he's up and okay. Hammer is out cold. Like, this could not be a flukier win for the champions.
Even Jesse Ventura chimes in to say, if you're not good, it helps to be lucky.
I feel like he accurately described the shoot career of Brutus Beefcake.
So this was the build to what would be the main event of the Chicago portion of WrestleMania 2, which was the Bulldogs winning the tag team titles at WrestleMania 2 with Captain Lou Albano and Ozzy Osbourne also in their corner, defeating Hammer and Beefer.
We should tell people, we should tell people, if I don't think there's a whole lot of the Beefer in the bonus feed, but if you want to see and hear much more about Captain Lou Albano, or dare I say Captain Lou Muraco, we, at the request of one of our patrons, watched the movie Body Slam from, I believe, this same year, 1986, and reviewed it. That's right, a movie review in the bonus feed. That alone is worth the price to support us over on the Patreon, and check that out.
After commercial, Mean Gene is at the hospital looking for Hogan, but they can't take cameras in the emergency room.
He is not at the hospital room. He is at the emergency trauma center. They are going very heavy-handed here. This is the opposite of a local medical facility. He cannot get word from the attending physician.
We then get the Real American music video, and I feel that this might just be the GIF for this week's episode, Adam.
It is. I don't know if you've noticed the theme that, if, when possible, I always err on the side of including a music video as a GIF. We had Bad Street USA over on the bonus feed recently. We had the Wild-Eyed Southern Boy Tommy Rich video on the bonus feed, and here it could be nothing else but Hulk Hogan in the Real American debut video. There, like, it's ridiculous the whole time. Like, I have so many notes about this, but like, the best part of this is Hogan fake strumming this guitar, obviously in front of a green screen, and there's this series of basically Hogan superimposed in front of all these American landmarks, fireworks. He's on a motorcycle, and they do some side-by-side between Hogan on the motorcycle and Paul Revere on a horse. This is 80s, coked up to the max. Hogan rips up a picture of Manuel Noriega. What are we doing?
This was amazing. We see like
The
childhood
best.
photos of Hogan within the stars, and then current day Hogan rocking the guitar in front of like all kinds of stock footage of American history, and just Hogan rocking the guitar.
It's
Was
basically
awesome.
Hulk Hogan cosplaying being a guitarist in front of like your childhood history class books in animated form.
Which is so funny because Hogan was legit in bands.
Yes.
Like
Bass player.
This is what he looked like on stage, jamming.
Yes, I was thinking that too. Like this Hulk Hogan, a guy who actually could play bass. This is what he looked like.
This is what he looked like.
I would have more likely bought Terry Gordy grabbing a bass when he was standing there singing background vocals with Michael Hayes in the Bad Street video. He would have looked like more of a legit bass player than the actual baseball player or bass player Hulk Hogan. I'm sure Hogan also said he was a baseball player as well.
Only when he heard the Macho Man was.
Yes.
Then he immediately had to be.
Yeah, Hall of Famer.
And we go to our final match of the evening. The Junkyard Dog taking on adorable Adrian Adonis. Two favorites of the podcast. We love Adrian Adonis matches, and this is Adrian Adonis's Saturday night's main event debut.
Yeah, this is one of those where, like, we love both guys. Junkyard Dog, yes. One of the reasons I became a wrestling fan in Louisiana, a childhood hero of mine. Adrian Adonis, a guy who we were familiar with and had seen stuff, but one of the guys who's been proof of concept for this podcast, all the things we've seen, we've completely fallen in love with him. I think back to some of the earlier stuff with him as the New York street punk look. Him walking around New York with Gene Okerlund was a highlight, but man, here
and Dick Murdoch walking around New York with Dick Murdoch in those vignettes
several times with them as a tag team, including kicking off the Black Saturday edition of wrestling on TBS. But man, all I can think of here is I want like 1983 Mid-South JYD against New York street punk Adrian Adonis rather than what we get here.
We do not get either of those things here. Man, but Junkyard Dog is popular. That's the first thing I know. He comes out and the people are losing their minds. Like Hogan-esque level of losing their minds for the Junkyard Dog.
People forget that, because it's, Junkyard Dog, he left Mid-South, things went bad. Like, he was super over nationally in the WWF when he first went there into the first few years, and was still pretty much the Junkyard Dog in the ring. Like, he had not really fallen off. And then Adrian Adonis, he is
huge.
And he would get even bigger. We've seen matches he was even bigger than this, but this is Adrian Adonis. Huge, small trunks, tiny legs, giant overweight upper body. He's got like 6 different kinds of makeup applied. And this is him going all in on a character that he didn't really want to be, but making the most of it.
Yeah, we do recommend the Dark Side of the Rings coverage of Adrian Adonis if you want to know more about this character, his feelings on it, and basically he's like, I don't like it, but I'm going to give it 110%, and he sure did here because JYD is throwing Adonis across the ring using his scarves that he had around his neck. And Adonis hits these buckles hard. He goes shoulder first to the post. He flips backward over the top rope, gets tied in the ropes. I've never seen that.
No, you want to talk like best thing in the show, that spoiler, that was it. I have never seen that spot. We see so many times. I always go back to the Iron Mike Sharp, Jim Powers rope tie up spot from that interminably long match on Primetime Wrestling that we reviewed. But here, to see up against the ropes, Adrian Adonis get like tossed or clothesline, whatever it was. And as that happens, he positions his arms in between the top and middle rope so he can flip back over, land feet on the apron, arms tied in. Unbelievable. Seeing Adrian Adonis do these athletic things with just the state of his body at this point. It's what an incredible, naturally gifted professional wrestler. And like you said, a guy who it's a lesson for every wrestler who has to do a character or a gimmick they don't want, or they're in a team that they don't want to be in, or they're not getting the push that they want. Look at what this guy did and how he maximized something he did not want and made it memorable.
He gets slingshot over the top rope from the apron back inside the ring, and I'm watching this guy bump around like crazy for Junkyard Dog, because this was a Junkyard Dog showcase.
Oh yeah.
And all I'm thinking is what an underutilized talent this guy was. Man, if he would have lived, you hope that he died in a car accident. If he would have lived, could he have been like, could it have been different? But man, we could have got more years or better usage out of Adrian Adonis if he went to WCW or he went somewhere else and like got.
Well, and that was probably going to be the trajectory. Like you watched that Dark Side of the Ring, he was making another run at it. He was going back to Japan, and I'm sure I could very easily see that reborn Adrian Adonis more like the Adrian Adonis of the early '80s. Like I can't fathom he would not have been in the transition from Crockett to Turner-owned NWA, 87, 88, 89. He certainly would have fit. And
you mentioned he was getting back in shape. Could you imagine what a lighter version of him could have done? Like, just watching him be this heavy and bouncing around like that, this would have been flying around like that. This would have been incredible if he dropped some weight and got back in the ring that way.
Like, I just imagine Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch reuniting their team, managed in WCW and the NWA by Gary Hart in 1989. Just hook it into my veins.
Back inside, Dog throws Jimmy Hart into Adonis. They both go over the top to the floor again. In the ring, Adonis distracts the referee while Jimmy Hart ties the Junkyard Dog's leg to the bottom rope using one of Adonis's scarves. Adonis is choking the Junkyard Dog. He does like a leaping fist drop and gets a 2 count. Adonis tries a pile driver, but the referee accidentally gets kicked by the Junkyard Dog. And as soon as the ref takes a bump, Jimmy Hart's on the apron. He's holding the megaphone. Junkyard Dog reverses and sends Adonis into Hart's megaphone. The Junkyard Dog gets the pin. After the match, Adonis hits Junkyard Dog with the megaphone. And that's the end of this encounter, and we go back to the hospital one more time before Saturday night's main event closes out.
Yeah, this match was great fun. It was such, like you said, a showcase of what Junkyard Dog can do. Adrian Adonis made him look like $1 million. Some of the bumps, even beyond what we talked about, he took the Dustin Rhodes bump off of a clothesline. He takes the Flair bump in the corner out to the apron. Just a tour de force from a guy who is being asked to do something that he, like we said, he didn't want to do. He's probably 100 pounds at least heavier than he would have liked to have been, but he's knocking it out of the park.
Back at the hospital, Mean Gene is with Dr. Panovich, and Hogan...
Why is this Dr. Panovich, the attending physician? He's dressed in like a double-breasted suit. What?
We're told that Hogan has injuries to his neck, back, and ribs. There was no internal bleeding, but more X-rays need to be done. They recap all the key angles leading to WrestleMania 2 that we just saw as the show goes off the air. You already mentioned it, Adam. Is it still your favorite thing on the show, Adrian Adonis?
Oh, yeah, I would say so for sure. That or the ridiculousness of Hulk Hogan playing the guitar in front of every American landmark and symbol you've ever seen. I will say, like, everything about the Bundy beatdown of Hogan, that post-match angle was great.
Tremendous.
But they did sabotage it a little bit by the end of the night by having the doctor basically say Hogan's bruised, but he's fine. And then Vince just saying, no one keeps the Hulkster down. He'll be A-okay. Like, they did such a great job of making you worried. And then by the end of the night, like, oh, no, it's fine.
Honorable mention to Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith for a tremendous beating in their match. Their offense was next level compared to everybody else on this show.
And a great job for whoever came up with the finish because it perfectly protected the Bulldogs while allowing that feud to be stretched out to WrestleMania.
And again, honorable mention to the performance of Bobby Heenan, whether he was bumping for Hogan or being terrified or cutting promos ahead of both the Bundy feud and on behalf of Fuji for Muraco. He was a tour de force as well. And so, worst thing on this show for you?
Oh man, the one line from Jesse was
Sure.
really rough. And I would say for me it was just how
Oh, Mr.
scripted.
T. We didn't give honorable mention to Mr.
Oh,
T and his promos and work
yes.
as a non-full-time wrestler. Great
Yeah,
guy.
being Mr. T, doing Mr.
Yeah.
T things, fully inhabiting the Mr. T character at all times. I would say for me, the most frustrating thing was, like I said, Jesse being so tightly scripted. It's off-putting when you can just tell he's reading lines. But it's super fun show. I mean, these Saturday night's main events, they have such a weird cadence because, like you said, you've got, basically the Hogan match, the world title match so early, but they always fly by. And this one was every bit that.
Yeah, I don't really have I can't think of really a worse thing on this show. It was everything was so well done.
Yeah.
They were everything was executed to perfection here. So yeah, not I think, yeah, I don't really have much on the way to criticize here.
I would say honorable mention would be how horrifically white Vince McMahon sounded when he was, what was the line about when JYD came out? So like, oh, we're in the dog pound or something, but he just sounded like the whitest man alive.
Yeah, this, yeah, otherwise, I think Dr. Panovich was probably the worst thing.
Yes,
in the show.
a rare misstep for that, the way that angle came off.
And with that, we're going to call it a podcast. We mentioned our bonus feed. Not only do we have the free show every single week on the location that you're listening to this podcast right now, but we also at patreon.com/wrestling@random have a bonus episode of this podcast every single week. You sign up for the month, it unlocks over 150 other episodes of this podcast you haven't heard yet. They're all there. Sign up, support the show there. If you can't support the show financially in these times and buying the bonus content, then make sure that you're subscribing to our YouTube video. That's another way to help us work the algorithm so other wrestling fans can find the show. Go and give us a thumbs up, a like, comment. We love to interact with everyone on the YouTube comments as well. That's the video version.
Interact with the show on YouTube, what we always say, right?
That's right. And you've got the video version of the podcast over there as well if you prefer to consume your podcast that way. And yeah, continue to tell your wrestling fan friends about the show. And your word of mouth is how we continue to grow. So thank you for everyone's support. And Adam, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Lorne Michaels, Dick Ebersol, and everyone involved with this collaboration between the WWF and NBC. Always enjoyable, and this was a good one.
And if you always want to see the great gifts that we use to tell you what shows are coming out, make sure you're following us on all the social media platforms. At Wrestle@Random for X, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky. We're on all those things at Wrestle@Random. Make sure you're following us there. Facebook.com/wrestling@random as well. Instagram is at Wrestle@Random. And with that, we're calling it a podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Talk to you again next time.